Before the Zuiko 12-100 Pro lens hit the market, I used the 12-50. It was launched some time ago as the kit lens for the first EM5 camera and is cheaper. By comparison with today's Pro lens specifications, its technical credentials are modest, having a zoom magnification of only 4 times, with a loss of 2 whole stops between wide-angle and telephoto. However, these restrictions, if indeed they are, should not be a problem for the experienced photographer who understands how shutter speeds and apertures do more than give correct exposures. The 12-50 is rubbished by some Zuiko Pro lens photographers as unworthy of serious consideration, labelling it a plastic lens. Wrong. But then, if you put a filter in front of an expensive Zuiko Pro lens, could you not end up with a plastic lens? One of its strengths is portability, and that it does not advertise the photographer. This shot outside Buckingham Palace of tourists totally engrossed in taking a selfie were completely unaware of my presence, and this is not the only shot, mind you. Afterwards I scampered away pretty quickly. The lens is also ideal for a 12-mile hike across mountain and moorland without being overburdened by unnecessary gear that is jokingly referred to as the hernia kit, which for me ended up as no joke. The real photographer creates cracking shots with just one camera and one lens and nothing else. After all, it focuses the mind. Comments about the 12-50 lens on Facebook are also disparaging. This balderdash is spoken by those who are either ignorant of basic photographic knowledge and are content in achieving the perfect average via auto, or by the experienced photographer who has never tried what is thought to be impossible. This shot of Donington Castle near Newbury, Berkshire, has been selected for a 2020 calendar, A4 size, image bled to edges. It is a straightforward shot, nothing technically clever about it, but it has proven its worth commercially. Therefore, whatever you think of the lens, this shot with the 12-50 achieves the requirements demanded for high-quality reproduction. The 12-50 lens excels in more demanding scenarios. Here are some shots explained in depth for the benefit of those photographers who have renounced auto. If not, my photo soundbites on YouTube are just the job. This shot of Thursley Common in Surrey is within the capabilities of most cameras and photographers, even those on auto and JPEGs, however. To add a bit of punch to colours, I underexpose by 1/3 of a stop. Although I accepted a 250th of a second at factor 7.1, whatever program gave me, but unlike auto, I can tweak other controls, putting myself in the picture with my own interpretation by spot metering and setting the white balance to cloudy, which warms the colours up a bit. Furthermore, by saving to RAW, I have far greater control for fine-tuning in Lightroom without degrading the image, essential for my Donington Castle photo, intended for publication and where third-party considerations are important. However, this shot of Llyn Idwal is in a totally different league. Now I am shooting into the light, and whilst the lens has survived this severe test, I must too, because the dynamic range is enormous, well beyond the camera's capabilities. Avoiding shadows with no detail and burnt-out highlights is seemingly impossible. One day we might have a sensor that can cope with these huge extremes at the press of a button, but not today. Burnt out highlights are more difficult to correct in post-production than shadows, even superior RAW files. Therefore, I spot meter quite close to a highlight, allowing the mountain to end up underexposed, and quite deliberately. In post-production with Lightroom, I lighten, shadow and darken highlights. Now, there is a caveat here, because lightening shadows might increase noise, but that may depend on the quality of your sensor. Another severe test for any lens is to take a shot at its maximum aperture. For many years I used the 12-50 inside churches, and at St Etheldreda in Holborn I am forced to use factor 3.5, the maximum aperture for this lens. Furthermore, like in Idwell, similar problems of contrast arise when trying to balance the exposure of a dark interior here with a bright window. And it's not helped by a lovely sunny day outside that has increased the dynamic range even further. Here I spot metered off a window and corrected underexposed areas in Lightroom with shadow and black sliders. Because of the superior image stabilizer in my Olympus OMD EM1, I was able to handhold at a quarter of a second, and most importantly, keep the ISO at 200, as the risk of noise increases with higher ISO values. These techniques are repeated at Newbury under similar conditions. At Riddlesdown in the London Borough of Croydon, I certainly crossed that red line of photographic correctness by setting the aperture to f22, risking diffraction. So why? Well, the alternative is excessive flare. Any shot into the light risks flare, which can be reduced by using a small aperture. Some burnout is unavoidable, hence the tree to mask it, but that has also helped to produce a starburst without resorting to a filter. Whilst this program is about the 12-50 lens, this shot actually is better executed with a prime optic, when a larger aperture could be used without causing flare or diffraction. One of the benefits of Micro Four Thirds is depth of field. Because of low light, I handheld this shot at f3.5, yet both Bible and background at Croom Park are sharp, which would not be possible, quite likely, not possible with a larger sensor format at this aperture setting. This has also been extended with the hyperfocal distance, that is, manually focusing about 2/3 into the picture, as depth of field extends twice as much beyond the focus point as in front. If the camera had focused on the background, it's quite likely that the Bible would not be sharp. Differential focusing with Micro Four Thirds is sometimes thought to be impossible. This is just utter nonsense, again said by those whose photographic knowledge does not extend beyond the auto button. This shot of Bracken has an out-of-focus background. Depth of field reduced by using simply a large aperture with a telephoto lens. If you don't know what I'm talking about, how unusual could that be? Nevertheless, my photo soundbites will set you right. One of the big photo challenges is nighttime photography. Most photographers, understandably, would use a tripod for a shot such as this. The shutter speed was 1/13 of a second, but I didn't. It is handheld, assisted by the image stabilizer and traditional techniques. Now, try to take photographs of London at night from Sky Garden and you will find that tripods are not allowed. And you have to shoot through a glass panel, so the problems are enormous. Here is the metadata to ponder on, but notice that the shutter speed is, again, a 13th of a second. Sharpness is helped by pressing the camera against the glass panel, standing 4 square and holding breath. Now, when did you last get that bit of advice? Not very high tech, is it? But it works, and it's much cheaper to use. I can preach until the cows come home about the rights and wrongs of landscape photography. But whatever the level of your technique and whatever your camera, you are locked into weather. And there is such a thing as the wrong sort of sun. The 12-50 is weatherproof, and I have taken it out in the most atrocious weather, often shoving it down my anorak for protection. But then, I'm not in this game for looks. When on a solo shoot, you'll be unaware of my presence. I remain incognito, as I need to stay in my own little photographic world, totally undisturbed. Now that I am the proud owner of a 12-100 Pro lens, why do I use it instead of the 12-50? Leaving aside cost, this could be, of course, a major consideration, dare I say, for some photographers. It is the extended zoom magnification, now usefully doubled at the telephoto end. f4 is the widest aperture, but constant, and perhaps most surprisingly, it has its own image stabilizer. Now, this works in conjunction with the camera's stabilizer, so it makes the use of a tripod totally unnecessary. Yes, it is heavier, but I still like to think I am a reasonably fit person. I can still tramp over mountain and moorland for 12 miles, weighed down only by a bus pass. But first, I make sure there is a bus service at the other end, for which the smartphone comes into its own. And if there isn't a bus and I have to walk back, I'll take the 12-50 instead.